The wrestling world just witnessed something absolutely explosive that nobody saw coming. Nick Aldis, the man who keeps SmackDown running like a well-oiled machine, just threw down the gauntlet in the most unexpected way possible. Paul Heyman, the legendary advocate and mastermind behind some of the most devious plans in WWE history, thought he had everything figured out for Wargames. He walked into Aldis's office with that trademark smirk, carrying blueprints for what he believed would be the ultimate strategic masterpiece. But what happened next left everyone in the WWE universe picking their jaws up off the floor. Aldis didn't just question Heyman's strategy, he completely tore it apart piece by piece, exposing every single flaw in a confrontation that has people talking from every corner of the wrestling community. And if you're loving this drama as much as we are, make sure you hit that subscribe button because things are about to get even more intense. The build-up to this moment has been brewing for weeks. Wargames isn't just another match on the calendar, it's the kind of event that defines careers and creates legends. 5 competitors locked inside 2 rings surrounded by an unforgiving steel cage, where alliances are tested and survival becomes the only thing that matters. Heyman has been pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating every move with the precision of a chess grandmaster. His reputation for crafting winning strategies is legendary, going back decades through multiple promotions and countless championships. When Heyman says he has a plan, people listen. Champions have been built on his vision, dynasties have been forged through his manipulation, and opponents have been destroyed by his carefully calculated schemes. But Nick Aldis represents a different breed of authority figure in WWE. This isn't some corporate suit who sits behind a desk signing papers and making phone calls. Aldis walked through the fires of competition long before he ever held a clipboard. He defended championships around the world, headlined major shows on multiple continents, and earned respect through blood, sweat, and determination inside that squared circle. When Aldis speaks about strategy, he's not quoting from a textbook or repeating what someone else told him. He's drawing from years of experience, from countless battles where one wrong move meant the difference between victory and devastating defeat. His transition from competitor to authority figure wasn't just a career move, it was the natural evolution of someone who understands this business from every possible angle. The meeting started innocuously enough. Heyman requested time to discuss his Wargames approach, and Aldis granted the audience like he would for any superstar under his watch. Security cameras captured Heyman entering the office with his usual confidence, documents rolled up under his arm, that characteristic swagger in his step that suggested he already knew how this conversation would end. He laid out his strategy on Aldis's desk with theatrical flair, pointing to different sections, explaining the nuances of his plan, detailing how each member of his team would be deployed at specific intervals to maximize chaos and ensure dominance. According to witnesses who were present, Heyman spoke for nearly 15 minutes without interruption, weaving a narrative about psychological warfare, physical intimidation, and tactical superiority. Then Aldis started asking questions. Simple questions at first, clarifying certain points, requesting elaboration on specific details. But anyone who has watched Aldis operate knows that his questions are never simple. They're surgical strikes designed to find weaknesses, to expose assumptions, to reveal the gaps between theory and reality. Heyman answered confidently at first, maintaining the trademark composure that has served him so well throughout his career. But as Aldis continued probing, the cracks started showing. The room temperature seemed to drop as Aldis leaned forward, his expression shifting from curious to critical. What happened next became the stuff of instant legend. Aldis stood up from his chair, walked around his desk, and began systematically dismantling every single element of Heyman's strategy. He pointed out that the entry order Heyman proposed left his team vulnerable during the crucial third interval. He explained how the cage positioning Heyman wanted to exploit actually created more danger than advantage. He identified 3 separate scenarios where Heyman's plan would collapse under pressure from an aggressive opponent. With each point, Aldis didn't just criticize, he provided specific examples from past Wargames matches, referencing moments that most people had forgotten but that clearly demonstrated his comprehensive understanding of this brutal environment. Heyman tried to counter, attempted to defend his vision, but Aldis was relentless. This wasn't personal animosity, it was professional accountability. Aldis made it crystal clear that as SmackDown general manager, he couldn't allow anyone, not even someone with Heyman's credentials, to walk into Wargames with a fundamentally flawed strategy that could result in serious injuries or worse. The authority in Aldis's voice was undeniable. This was someone who had survived his own wars, who understood that inside that cage, theories become irrelevant and only preparation, adaptability, and raw determination matter. The tension escalated when Aldis brought up specific members of Heyman's team. He questioned whether certain superstars were properly prepared for the Wargames environment, whether they understood the unique demands of fighting inside that structure. Heyman, clearly bristling at having his judgment questioned, fired back that he's been managing top talent for over 3 decades. But Aldis wasn't backing down. He countered that experience managing talent is different from preparing them for the specific hell that is Wargames. He referenced matches where even the most talented competitors faltered because they underestimated the psychological impact of being trapped inside steel, where the normal rules of engagement don't apply and desperation becomes a weapon. What made this confrontation so compelling was the mutual respect underlying the conflict. Both men have achieved incredible success in this industry through completely different paths. Heyman built his legacy through his mind, through his ability to see 3 moves ahead, to manipulate situations and create opportunities where none seemed to exist. Aldis built his through his body, through punishing matches that tested his limits, through championship reigns that demanded he prove himself night after night against the best competition the wrestling world could offer. Neither could dismiss the other's credentials, which made their disagreement about Wargames' strategy all the more intense. Aldis then did something that shocked everyone in that room. He pulled out his own analysis of the Wargames structure, complete with diagrams and notes that he had been compiling for weeks. This wasn't some rushed response to Heyman's proposal. Aldis had been studying Wargames independently, preparing for exactly this kind of situation. He showed Heyman alternative strategies, different approaches that accounted for variables Heyman had apparently overlooked. He demonstrated scenarios where speed trumps power, where positioning matters more than numbers, where psychological warfare can be turned against those who rely on it too heavily. The documents Aldis presented revealed something fascinating about his approach to management. He wasn't just sitting in his office making arbitrary decisions. He was actively studying, analyzing, preparing to ensure that every superstar under his watch had the best possible chance of success. His breakdown of Wargames tactics included references to classic matches from the concept's inception, modern variations that changed certain dynamics, and even hypothetical scenarios that might emerge based on current roster capabilities. This level of preparation demonstrated why WWE trusted him with the SmackDown brand. Heyman's reaction evolved throughout this exchange. Initial confidence gave way to frustration, then to grudging acknowledgement, and finally to something that looked almost like respect. As much as it clearly bothered him to have his strategy challenged, Heyman couldn't ignore the validity of Aldis's points. The legendary advocate found himself in unfamiliar territory, being outmaneuvered in the very arena where he typically dominates. His body language shifted, the swagger diminished, and for one of the rare times in his career, Paul Heyman appeared genuinely uncertain about his next move. But here's where things took another unexpected turn. Rather than simply rejecting Heyman's entire strategy, Aldis proposed a collaboration. He suggested combining elements of Heyman's psychological approach with tactical adjustments that would address the vulnerabilities he had identified. This wasn't about ego or proving superiority, it was about creating the best possible strategy for Wargames' success. Aldis acknowledged that Heyman's understanding of individual competitor psychology was invaluable, but insisted that it needed to be paired with practical tactical awareness that accounts for the unique Wargames environment. The proposal caught Heyman off guard. He had entered that office expecting either approval or outright rejection, not a counterproposal that required him to adapt and compromise. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted. Aldis wasn't just the authority figure rubber-stamping decisions, he was an active participant in shaping the strategy itself. This collaboration, if Heyman accepted it, would represent a fundamental change in how Wargames preparations were being handled. It would mean acknowledging that even the great Paul Heyman doesn't have all the answers, that even legendary minds need fresh perspectives when facing an environment as unforgiving as Wargames. Sources close to the situation report that the meeting extended well beyond its scheduled time. What was supposed to be a quick strategy approval turned into an hours-long session where 2 brilliant minds debated, argued, and ultimately began constructing something potentially revolutionary. They analyzed past Wargames matches together, identifying patterns that neither had fully appreciated independently. Heyman brought historical context and psychological insights while Aldis contributed tactical awareness and modern competitive understanding. The synthesis of their perspectives created strategies that addressed weaknesses in traditional Wargames approaches. The wrestling community reaction to news of this confrontation has been absolutely volcanic. Social media exploded with opinions, theories, and speculation about what this means for the upcoming Wargames event. Some fans praised Aldis for standing up to Heyman and refusing to be manipulated by the legendary advocate's reputation. Others questioned whether Aldis was overstepping his authority by getting so deeply involved in strategic planning rather than simply managing the roster. Veteran wrestlers weighed in with their own perspectives, many expressing surprise that anyone would challenge Heyman's strategic vision while others applauded Aldis for bringing practical experience to the conversation. What this confrontation really represents is a larger shift in how WWE approaches major events. Gone are the days when authority figures simply facilitated matches and stayed out of the way. Modern wrestling demands more comprehensive management, where those in charge understand not just the business side but the competitive realities their superstars face. Aldis embodies this evolution perfectly. He's not disconnected from the action, he's intimately familiar with what his roster experiences every time they step through those ropes. His willingness to challenge even someone as established as Paul Heyman demonstrates a commitment to excellence that goes beyond maintaining the status quo. The implications for Wargames itself are enormous. If Aldis and Heyman can truly collaborate and merge their strategic approaches, the match could reach a level of sophistication rarely seen in WWE. The combination of Heyman's psychological manipulation and Aldis's tactical precision could create scenarios that push every competitor to their absolute limits. On the other hand, if this collaboration falls apart, if egos clash and compromise becomes impossible, it could lead to chaos that undermines the entire event. The stakes couldn't be higher, and everyone from superstars to fans is watching closely to see how this unfolds. Behind the scenes, other members of the SmackDown roster are reportedly paying close attention to this situation. They're seeing their general manager stand toe-to-toe with one of the most powerful figures in WWE and not back down. That kind of leadership doesn't go unnoticed. Superstars respect authority figures who fight for them, who understand their challenges, who refuse to let anyone, regardless of reputation, put them in unnecessarily dangerous situations. Aldis's confrontation with Heyman sends a clear message to the entire locker room that he's not just managing from a distance, he's genuinely invested in their success and safety. The technical aspects of what Aldis challenged in Heyman's strategy are fascinating for anyone who understands Wargames dynamics. The match structure creates unique problems that don't exist in standard wrestling environments. The cage limits escape options, the dual ring setup creates confusion about positioning, and the timed entry system means teams never have full control of numbers for extended periods. Heyman's original strategy apparently relied heavily on psychological intimidation during the early stages, but Aldis correctly identified that inside the cage, intimidation only works if backed by tactical superiority. A scared opponent trapped in a cage can become desperately dangerous, and desperation often trumps strategy in confined spaces. Aldis also questioned Heyman's assumptions about stamina management. Wargames matches can extend well beyond normal bout durations, and competitors who burn energy too quickly in the opening segments often become liabilities later. Heyman's strategy apparently called for aggressive early attacks to establish dominance, but Aldis pointed out that this approach could leave his team exhausted when fresh opponents entered during later intervals. The conversation dove deep into conditioning, recovery time between high-impact sequences, and how to maintain offensive pressure without depleting resources too quickly. These aren't theoretical concerns, they're practical realities that determine winners and losers in brutal cage environments. Another major point of contention involved weapon usage. Wargames tradition includes introducing various implements into the match, and Heyman had specific plans for when and how to deploy these elements. Aldis challenged the timing, arguing that introducing weapons too early telegraphs intentions and allows opponents to prepare counters. He suggested alternative approaches that kept opponents guessing, that turned their own expectations against them. This level of detailed strategic thinking impressed even Heyman, who has spent decades crafting similar schemes. The fact that Aldis could match him concept for concept in this arena forced Heyman to reassess his initial dismissive attitude toward the general manager's input. The personal dynamic between these two men adds another layer to this situation. They come from different eras of wrestling, trained under different philosophies, and achieved success through contrasting methods. Heyman represents the old guard, the era when managers and advocates wielded enormous power through their words and their ability to manipulate situations. Aldis represents a newer generation that values action alongside rhetoric, that demands proof through competition rather than just clever talking points. Their collision in that office wasn't just about Wargames strategy, it was about competing visions of what wrestling should be and how success should be achieved. As word of this confrontation spreads throughout WWE, it's creating ripple effects beyond just SmackDown. Other brand authority figures are reportedly reassessing their own approaches to major event planning. If Aldis succeeds in implementing his collaborative strategy model with Heyman, it could become the template for how WWE handles these massive multi-competitor matches going forward. The industry is watching this experiment closely because it could redefine the relationship between management, advocates, and competitors. The days of pure kayfabe separation between these roles are fading, replaced by more integrated approaches that acknowledge the complex realities of modern wrestling. The pressure on both Aldis and Heyman to deliver something special at Wargames is now immense. They've set expectations incredibly high through this confrontation and their subsequent collaboration attempts. If the match delivers a classic that showcases innovative strategy and compelling storytelling, they'll both receive credit for pushing beyond conventional boundaries. If it fails, if the strategy falls apart or the match disappoints, the criticism will be severe. They've put themselves in a position where success requires validation through results, not just promises or theories. That's a dangerous place to be in WWE, where audience expectations are unforgiving and memories are long. What makes this entire situation so captivating is the authenticity underlying it. This isn't manufactured drama for television cameras, it's a genuine clash between two highly intelligent individuals who both believe they know the best path to success. The wrestling business has always thrived on these real tensions, these legitimate disagreements that create compelling television because they're rooted in genuine belief and professional pride. Aldis dismantling Heyman's strategy wasn't a scripted segment designed to generate social media buzz, it was a necessary confrontation between management and talent that happens to have massive implications for one of WWE's biggest events of the year. The fact that cameras weren't rolling during the initial meeting makes it even more legitimate, even more representative of the real power dynamics that exist behind the scenes. The evolution of this story will play out over the coming weeks as Wargames approaches. Every interaction between Aldis and Heyman will be scrutinized for signs of continuing tension or genuine collaboration. The competitors themselves will become part of this narrative, caught between following Heyman's psychological warfare approach and Aldis's tactical modifications. How they navigate these competing visions could determine not just match outcomes but future opportunities and pushes within WWE. Smart superstars are already positioning themselves to benefit from whichever strategic approach proves superior, hedging their bets in case the Aldis-Heyman collaboration implodes before Wargames even begins. This confrontation also raises interesting questions about the future of Paul Heyman in WWE. His mystique has always been tied to being the smartest person in the room, the guy who sees angles nobody else recognizes, who manipulates situations to create advantages where none existed. Having that image challenged by someone like Aldis, who brings equal intelligence but different experience, could either diminish Heyman's influence or force him to evolve and adapt. The legendary advocate has reinvented himself multiple times throughout his career, adjusting to changing eras and new challenges. This might be another pivotal moment where Heyman must decide whether to cling to old methods or embrace collaboration with a new generation of wrestling minds who respect his legacy but refuse to be intimidated by it. For Nick Aldis, this confrontation cements his position as a different kind of authority figure in WWE. He's not passive, he's not just reacting to situations as they develop. He's proactive, prepared, and willing to challenge anyone when he believes it's necessary for the success and safety of his roster. That kind of leadership builds loyalty among superstars who appreciate having someone in power who genuinely understands their world. It also creates potential for future conflicts with other powerful figures in WWE who may not appreciate having their decisions questioned so directly. Aldis has drawn a line in the sand, establishing that on SmackDown, strategy and preparation matter more than reputation or legacy when it comes to major events. The wrestling world now waits with anticipation to see how this story concludes at Wargames. Will the Aldis-Heyman collaborative strategy produce something revolutionary, or will their competing visions create confusion and chaos? Will the match validate Aldis's challenges to Heyman's original plan, or prove that the legendary advocate knew best all along? These questions will be answered inside that unforgiving steel cage, where theory meets reality and only results matter. One thing is certain though, this confrontation between Nick Aldis and Paul Heyman has elevated Wargames from just another match to a proving ground for competing philosophies about how modern wrestling should be strategized, executed, and managed. If you want to see how this incredible story unfolds and witness whether Aldis's bold move pays off or backfires spectacularly, make sure you subscribe to our channel because we'll be covering every single development as Wargames approaches and these two brilliant minds either create something special together or watch their collaboration crumble under the pressure of their own massive expectations.